Today, we're diving into a story about a corporate divorce, and a messy one at that. On one side, you've got a star managing director for DHL Kenya, a guy who was literally winning awards for the company. And on the other, you've got the global giant that fired him. This is the story of a spectacular fall from grace and a really bitter fight that all ended up in court.
So you have to ask yourself, how does this even happen? How does a leader who in 2019 helps his company snag a presidential award get accused of gross misconduct and fired just 2 years later? I mean, that's a wild turnaround. We're going to break down exactly how it all went down, using the official court records as our guide.
All right, let's get into it. First up, we need to set the scene. The story here revolves around one man, Andrew Mutuma, and his career at DHL Worldwide Express Kenya.
Andrew Mutuma's career at DHL was, frankly, on a rocket ship. He gets hired in 2016, and just 3 years later, his leadership helps the company win a presidential award. He was a bona fide star performer, so much so that in late 2020, they nominated him for a high-potential leadership program, which makes what happened next so jarring. Less than a year later, bam, he's suddenly suspended.
So this brings us to one side of the coin, Mutuma's story. He basically argued that his firing had nothing to do with his performance. No, he said it was pure retaliation because he was pushing back against his bosses on some serious issues of fairness and how the company was being run.
And listen to this. This is a quote straight from the court judgment that gets to the heart of his claim. It says the foreign team bullied, belittled, and insulted the local staff. And when he decided to address it formally, his bosses in South Africa, well, they didn't like that. So in his mind, he stood up for his people. And that's when a target was painted on his back.
He points to some very specific battles he was fighting behind the scenes. He says he protested against appointing a white South African to a top job, calling it favoritism. He alleged there was racism on the board. He also says he fought a move to kick out an ailing, very well-known director, calling it illegal. The way he tells it, he wasn't being difficult, he was trying to do the right thing, and it made him some powerful enemies.
But of course, there are two sides to every story. DHL came back with a completely different narrative. From their point of view, this wasn't about retaliation at all. They claimed they had found serious, fireable offenses, what they called gross misconduct.
So let's talk about that term for a second, gross misconduct. It's really important to understand. This isn't just about making a few mistakes. It means you've willfully and seriously broken your contract or company policies. And here's the kicker. It allows a company to fire you on the spot. No notice, no severance package. It's basically the nuclear option for an employer.
So what was DHL's case against him? Well, the list is pretty long. They painted a picture of an executive who'd gone rogue. They said he approved a big bonus he wasn't allowed to and changed the employee rule book without permission. They also hit him with charges of negligence, of refusing to cooperate with their investigation, and even of leaking company secrets. This was the whole foundation for their decision to fire him.
And throughout this whole ordeal, DHL was firm on one point. They insisted their process was fair. They said they gave Mutuma a link to all the evidence and every chance to defend himself. Now, you're going to want to remember that part, because it becomes absolutely critical when the judge makes a final decision.
Okay, so you've got two completely conflicting stories on the table. One of retaliation, the other of misconduct. This is where it all comes to a head, the judge's verdict. The court had to sift through all of it and figure out what really happened.
And the verdict? It was decisive. The court found that Mutuma's dismissal was unfair. And not just unfair, but unfair on two separate counts. First, it was procedurally unfair, meaning how DHL fired him was wrong. And second, it was substantially unfair, meaning the reasons they fired him just didn't hold water.
So why did the court say the process was so flawed? Well, the judge laid out 3 critical failures. First, DHL said they were investigating him, but then they never actually produced an investigation report, not to him, not even to their own disciplinary panel. Second, they refused to give him hard copies of the evidence, which basically crippled his ability to defend himself. And finally, the court agreed with Mutuma, calling his complaint about management being biased against him a well-founded grievance. The whole process was just fundamentally broken. And this is where the judge just tears DHL's arguments apart, piece by piece. Remember that unauthorized bonus? The court called it an unjustified afterthought and pointed out that not only was it policy, but DHL was, get this, still paying it. Those negligent firings? The judge found Mutuma was just following HR's advice. And the handbook changes? That was the HR manager's job, a manager who, by the way, left the company with a perfectly clean record.
So, with the verdict in, what was the final outcome for everyone involved? Let's take a look at the final scorecard. The big number for Mutuma was just under 8.9 million Kenyan shillings. That broke down into 1 month's pay because he wasn't given notice, plus a full 6 months of his gross salary as direct compensation for being fired unfairly.
So when all the dust settled, what did each side actually walk away with? Well, Andrew Mutuma got a legal declaration that his firing was unfair, plus that payment of nearly 9 million shillings. And DHL? After this long, expensive legal battle, they won an order to get their company car back.
Ultimately, this whole case leaves us with one massive question. If the process for deciding if someone is guilty is itself completely unfair, we're talking withheld evidence, clear bias, then what does a label like misconduct even mean? It's a powerful reminder that in the world of corporate justice, sometimes how a decision gets made is a whole lot more important than the decision itself.